Israel versus Iran war. Be prepared for a possible food shortage. Most people think that only oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, but that's not true. This narrow waterway is also one of the most important routes for global fertilizer supply. Around 50% of the world's traded urea fertilizer moves through the Strait of Hormuz. If this war continues for a long time, the world should also prepare for a possible food shortage. Urea is the most widely used fertilizer on Earth and plays a critical role in global food production. Some of the world's biggest urea producers are located around the Persian Gulf, including Iran, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain. Large shipments of fertilizer from these countries pass through this route every day to reach global markets. If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed or heavily disrupted, the world will not only face an oil shortage but also a serious fertilizer crisis. And when fertilizer supply drops, food production across the world is affected. Countries that rely heavily on imported fertilizer could face major problems. These include Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Brazil, Turkey, and many African nations that depend on urea imports to support their agriculture. In simple terms, if this route stays blocked, the impact will go far beyond energy markets. It could trigger higher food prices, lower crop production, and even food shortages in several parts of the world. That is why the Strait of Hormuz is not just an oil choke.
Alright, Shalom. First and foremost, before I get started, I'm going to give all glory and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakak Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders at Great Millstone who teach and rule well. And peace and salutations to the elect out there feeding the sheep of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai with sincerity, with charity and truth. I'm the brother Barak, and Lord willing, this will be an edifying lesson. And basically the topic of this lesson will be keep an eye on these these prices, right? Keep an eye on these prices, and I'm speaking about what prices of crude oil, right? Prices of gasoline locally, right? And even prices of food, which is like everyday items, right? But keep an eye on those prices, because right now you can still buy certain things, right? You can still buy food. Yeah, it's expensive, and it's a lot more expensive than a couple years ago, but you're gonna really see the things we were speaking about. For those people who didn't really truly believe what we were saying, for those people who truly did not believe what we were saying, right? we're at the end of this man's society, bro. We're at the end of this man's society, right? And we're seeing the downfall of his infrastructure, right? And one of the things that is going to lead up to this is the prices of gasoline, right? Crude oil, right? And basic food supplies, and all this is linked together. These aren't separate entities, right? All these are linked to the infrastructure, because you have gasoline and that's how trucks get their fuel, right? And trucks have to transport different food items, and you need fuel to operate tractors and machinery, and just all types of equipment, right? In order to transport different types of food and fertilizer, right? You need oil, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You need the oil, and this with this whole situation with the Strait of Hormuz, right? Basically now 50%, which in that particular region, 50% of the world's, I guess, or many countries' oil supplies, well, not just oil, but fertilizer comes from, right? So, expect within days or weeks, right, to see those prices shoot up if this conflict escalates, right? This is the book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 16, and verse 21. And it says, "Behold, victuals shall be so good cheap upon the earth, that they think that they shall think themselves to be in a good case, and even then shall evils grow upon earth, sword, famine, and great confusion, right? So you have what evil saw grow upon the earth, right? Right now we are seeing that happen, and we're seeing what, you can see, we're still in the green tree still, right? But you're seeing the prices slowly rise up. However, you can still buy things, right? You can still order Uber Eats. You can still go to certain food stores like Dollar Tree, right? You can still get a box of Eggo waffles, for like $3. You know what I'm saying? You can still get some different types of food items. There's still, there's no complete famine yet, right? And keep in mind when the Lord says something, the Lord, he means what he says. So if there's going to be a famine, there's going to be a famine. There's no in between. You know what I'm saying, right? The Lord says people are going to starve. These people are going to starve. You know what I'm saying? So, however, things are still considered cheap relative to what they will be, right? Because when all hell breaks loose, things are going to be so expensive, right? And scarce, where you'll be lucky to find a fucking packet of ketchup on the floor, right? Like, what one of those packet of ketchups that they give out for free at like a Chick-fil-A or like a McDonald's, the ones that they leave at the bottom of the cardboard bag, the paper bags, right? You'll be lucky if you find one of those, bro. That's how actually bad it's going to be, bro. Right? So people can still buy things, right? And so they think nothing will happen. They think that there will be no famine. They still think they got another 1,000 more years, right? They think that this won't happen in their lifetime, but they are sadly mistaken, these people, right? This is the book of Revelation, chapter 6 and verse 6. And it says, "And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine." Right? And what is that word penny? Right? It's not speaking about the literal American penny, right? This word penny in this context is speaking about a day's wages, right? So go to the Strong's interlinear concordance for the word penny, for a penny, and it's Strong's G1220, right, which goes back to the word denarion, right? It says denarius, containing 10, a Roman silver coin. In the New Testament time, it took its name from being equal to 10 asses, right? And so if you go down, it says, it would seem that a denarius was then the ordinary pay for a day's wages, right? And then it says right here, a denarius, day's pay in the Roman Empire. It says the denarius was the standard Roman silver coin, and its value fluctuated over time. During the Republic era, the pay for legionaries was around 112 denarii, 112.5 denarii per year, which was increased to 225 denarii a year. Right, so you get the point. This is speaking about basically what? This is speaking about a day's wages, right? So getting back to the point, right? It says a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny, right? So you're speaking about, just prices for simple things like bread, right? So a bag of wheat, right? Which is going to go for, you might have to pay a whole day's wages, right? That's how bad this that's how bad it's going to basically get. The prices of, that's how actually bad the inflation will become, right? And have another video basically I'll play it right now. Let's see.
So I'm walking around Costco here and I'm noticing these prices. For example, these Madras lentils, $15.99. I bought those a year ago for $6.99. Let's look at what else we got going on here. Dang, this is the flour we were buying for $5.99 last year.
So as you can see, right, the price of flour went from $5.99 to $12.99, right? So 100% increase, if not more, of actual just for the price of flour, right? And as you can see, actually notice this after in the screenshot of the flour, right? You can see the number is 144, right above the price, right? So that's the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai showing basically these signs, these numbers, right? And yeah, just is something to keep your eye out on, right? You're gonna see these prices go up even more, right? And you're gonna see people start complaining, people start getting pissed off, right? And I got one more precept before I'm gonna close out. This is the book of Matthew 24:7. It says, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places, right? So and then the verse after that, it says right after, it says, all these are the beginning of sorrows, right? So we're only these sorrows are only getting started, right? It's a gradual process. It's not going to happen overnight, right? That's why we have to be patient, right? But we're seeing these things start to escalate. So keep an eye on these prices. Keep an eye on these different, prices of crude oil, right? Gasoline, and different store-bought items like flour, right? And just keep an eye on these prices. Watch them go up, right? So with that being said, I'm going to give all glory and honor to Yahweh, Ba'Shem, Yahushai, Ba'Shem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders at Great Millstone who teach and rule well, and peace and salutations to the elect out there feeding the sheep of Yahweh, Ba'Shem, Yahushai with sincerity and charity. Shalom.